In the dark of the night, I'm playing Pac-Man. It's my second life. The joysticks in my hand, I'm unstoppable. High score secrets, I've got them all unlocked. Memories rush back like a time machine. Take me back to the arcade, where I spent my younger days. In the black lights glowing on a pocket full of tokens. Dance and groove to the beat, on the pixelated screen we meet. New wave melodies playing loud. Lost in the arcade, my heart is found. Hair and red fashion, we were all quite excited. Popping tokens in the cabinet, it's the thrill of the fight. We save the world through pixelated dreams. We're the greatest generation with the faded acid cheese. Take me back to the arcade, where I spent my younger days. In the black lights glowing on a pocket full of tokens. Dance and groove to the beat.
Hi, welcome to Stream 1, Day 2 of Week of AI. We're happy that you chose to be here with us today. And we have the amazing Scott Bricker from California, founder of All Full Learning, not Awful Learning, but All AWE Full. He's on a mission to transform education in the U.S. by reigniting awe, wonder, and curiosity. His extensive background as a teacher, coach, and tech director fuels his passion for making profound impact on educational practices and processes. He's a seasoned speaker and captivates audiences nationwide, actually worldwide, because we are global, urging them to delve into the why behind their educational approaches with recent talks on AI, rethinking assessment, and leveraging neuroscience to modernize learning. You've had 25 years in the classroom. That's amazing.
Yep. Just means I'm the old guy in the room now, not the new teacher anymore. That's all that means.
Oh, I'm starting to feel it. Some of the acronyms that are dropping and dripping and Riz and
Right.
I mean, I remember when selfie was put in the dictionary.
Yep.
Back
Now we're just
Yeah.
dating ourselves.
Yes, totally. 80s babies. Woo, at least
Right?
I am. You're 80s. You're 80s baby.
Just before, a little earlier, but not much.
Oh, you didn't have to divulge that.
That's okay.
All right. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and kick you off, and I'm going to pop down and let you have the stage. Feel free to drop comments for Scott in the chat as he goes through his presentation. We're going to kick off assessment in the age of AI.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much for the introduction and really for putting on this great event. If any of you who are watching haven't had the pleasure of meeting Amanda, find her at some conference. The genius behind everything she's created with this event and everything she does is impressive, and just honored to be here and be speaking with you all today. So thanks to those who are here. This is a little bit different session, I think, I hope anyway, than what you may see throughout the rest of the Week of AI, but I think it plays really nicely into everything that I've seen so far. So whether you are watching live with us, or if you're watching the recording after, or the stream, whatever the case may be, I'd love to connect with you. And so I put together just a brief little form here. I promise I'm not going to spam you with emails. This is literally just to share out slide decks and information after this session. This session was originally a 90-minute session for my conference tour this past year. So I've kind of dialed it in a little bit, but I'd love to share the entire slide deck with you. And one of the other kind of partner sessions that I've been doing just to add context to it. So feel free to grab that QR code. I'll throw the link in the chat at the end as well, so you have that to do that as well. So thanks for being here. A little bit about me, just so you know some of the context of where I come from. Amanda mentioned my 26th year in education, with still, whether I say it or Amanda says it, it's just, I can't believe 26 years have passed. But what it means is I'm committed to this profession. I love this industry. I love the work that we do as educators. And even though it's more challenging than ever, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, I still love it. And part of what I get to do now is see education through my entire family's eyes. So that wonderful family of mine there, my wife, Megan, is a principal at an elementary school here in Southern California. And our two boys obviously are in school. They'll finally be at the same school next year, one drop off. Those of you parents who have lived the multiple drop-off life know what that is like. So we're happy to have one drop-off. But what it means is we are all education all the time. And what it really means is our boys are really in trouble. They will not be able to get away with anything because their parents have either lived it, done it, seen it, reprimanded somebody for it, or had a meeting with a parent about it. So anything they will try to do in school, we have already been through. But it's been really fun for us to see learning and education through their eyes as well. And one of the biggest things that they've exposed me to that is kind of the running theme for this whole session and will appear kind of several times is just this idea of creating more awe and wonder in everything we do. So as we kick off this session, I would encourage you, in addition to whatever lens you want to look through it, wherever you chose this session, I want to be true to that. But I would also ask you just to kind of think about just the idea of wondering more and thinking about things and curiosity and all the different words and synonyms that go along with that. Because that's kind of what's spurred me on this journey and continues to drive me to want to change education. And in terms of changing education, what I hope this session does for you is really shift the conversation. While I've learned so much already. Holly's keynote yesterday was fantastic. Donnie's keynote today was great. If you haven't had a chance to watch those, please go see them. Catch all the sessions. There's so many great ideas out there. This session is not about AI per se. We're not going to go deep into prompt engineering or bias or policies or even any of the AI tools. This is really about how all of those things that are very important. I buy into so many of them. But this is really a conversation about the core of what it means to be a school, what it means to have a process of learning and teaching. And why I think that's particularly valuable is this is how I feel education is right now. The moral compass of education is sort of in an infinite loop, if you will, to use a technology, a term or phrase. We've sort of lost our way. And I really would love to be one small cog in the wheel that gets things rolling in the right direction and kind of helps us find a North Star. And this work is not easy, right? I want to say off the top, any of you who have stuck through the past couple years, COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID, doesn't matter. And now AI and technology and just the world where we are. I commend you and thank you for continuing on this journey because we need all of you. For us to make change, we need all of us to work together in this whole thing. What I hope education will become is something like this. And while I don't necessarily like the seating arrangement of the students, and I'll circle back to this as well later in the session, but I want students and teachers and schools and parents and everybody in the community to dream of what's possible. And this image was purposely designed using AI, by the way, to look confusing and kind of a convoluted collection of things and ideas. But what I hope education can become is just an open door to anything that's possible and kind of breaking down any barriers and walls that we currently have in our way. What I often find myself thinking, though, is pondering this question. Literally, what are we doing? What in the heck, or whatever other word you want to throw in there, what in the heck are we doing in education? I see so many great things happening, and yet I see so many things where I'm like, that was happening 40 years ago, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, or we're kind of repeating the same steps that we've done forever. And the world is vastly different, in case you haven't noticed, from what it was 5 years ago, let alone 10, 15, or even however many years it was since I was in K-8 or K-12 in my experience. Any of you are from the 70s and 80s. It's a completely different world. Could not be more different. So as I think that, once I get the frustrated approach out of the way, I kind of reframe that question. I really start to think about what is it that we're doing? What are the real critical, tangible ideas and things, for lack of a better word, that we want our students to leave K-8, K-12, K-20, whatever it is, to enter into the world? What do we want them to have? What does their basket or their toolkit look like? And how do we get there? And I assure you, it's not how many things they can memorize or how many tests they've taken or even their GPA. And we'll talk about that in today's session as well, because I think that's a valuable piece of this. But that's a question that pops into my head often, is really trying to remember what that North Star is. Any of you who have been through curriculum redesign or developed curriculum for a particular course, you talk about backwards design, right? You always want to know what the end goal is, and then you work to build up to that. And so this is kind of my backwards design, trying to think about what I want it to look like in the end, and then working my way back to something really, really valuable and impactful. So here's kind of our journey for today. Those first 3 items there, we're going to kind of press through in like 15, 20 minutes. And then the last 20 is really going to be I think probably what you came for, really talking about assessment and how that needs to change, again, in this age of AI, right? In light of all these great tools, Magic School and Diffit and CurePod, and we could go on and on, right? In light of all those things in the world, what do we do? That'll come kind of at the end, but I really want to provide some context for you on why this is all so important. So the first thing, and Amanda mentioned this in my intro, in my bio, the brain is an amazingly powerful tool. And what I think has frustrated me most over the last handful of years, and I've gotten big into, I'm not a neuroscientist or a neurobiologist by any means, but I've been reading a bunch. And what amazes me most is that you wouldn't take your car to a mechanic who had never studied the engine. You would never go to a restaurant with a chef that had never studied food. You would never hire an engineer or construction crew who had never studied angles or force or design or anything like that. And yet every day we put students in classrooms with teachers who haven't studied the brain. And that's not your fault. That's on our credential programs and teacher prep programs. They don't address neuroscience in the way that we should. And we know more about the brain today than we ever have before. The research has advanced so tremendously in the last 4, 5, 7, maybe 10 years. And we've got to start paying attention to it. We don't have time to go into it deep today, but I wanted to share 2 resources in particular. These are 2 wonderful, wonderful books if you're interested in kind of tapping into the importance of neuroscience and brain research in learning. NeuroTeach and Brain Rules. Brain Rules on the right is kind of I like to call it Brain Rule or Neuroscience for Dummies. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but if you know that series, it really just breaks down the neuroscience behind learning in a really tangible, digestible way. That's really easy to understand and apply, not just to your own learning, but to your own individual classroom and teaching and whatever role you have in schools. The one on the left, NeuroTeach, a little more, I would say actually a little bit more than slightly sophisticated, much more scientific approach, but nevertheless, incredibly valuable resource of connecting how the brain works, growth mindset, all the different parts of the brain and how they function, prefrontal cortex, all that kind of stuff, and really connects it back to actual learning in the classroom. Highly recommend those. I don't make any money off this, just 2 books I love. I've read them both multiple times. And if you're interested, really, really cool resources to get into. So that's just kind of the underlying, everything I talk about, really, I try to connect back to the brain research and the science behind it, because I think it's so valuable to understand how our kids' brains evolve. And currently we're asking them to do things that physically their brain is not capable of doing, right? Any of you who know that there are parts of the brain that aren't developed until 2025, even sometimes later. And yet we're expecting students to be able to handle some of these tasks and responsibilities at 6, 8, 12, 15 years old. And so I think if we can shift that, that will create a more solid foundation. So I want to make sure I pay attention to the chat and look at all your comments. Please, those of you that are watching live, feel free to chime in, discuss with each other, throw questions at me. I'll try and address them. Best comment so far, go Padres. Thank you, Jeff. Devout Padre fan in San Diego. So Appreciate all that. Love it very much. Again, throw a ton of questions my way. I see more books coming in there from Jill Lynn Carter. I appreciate that. Love it, love it, love it. So, all right, second piece is this idea of artificial intelligence. I mean, obviously, we're at a conference on AI. We have to talk about it. But I have struggled of late with that word artificial. And I know this is semantics. I know this is just a bit of tweaking the English language, but there's nothing fake about it. I would love to get rid of that word artificial and have us start calling it something like alternative intelligence. Still AI. We can keep the same acronym. But I just think there's nothing fake about it. It's very real. It's very interesting. It's very fascinating. It's very impactful. It's also very scary when put in wrong hands, right? So I think this idea of being able to understand and harness this new intelligence, this alternative intelligence, and maybe most important, I heard this acronym for the first time last summer from a couple people, a couple educators at ISTE last year in Philly. HI, human intelligence, right? So really taking the power of alternative intelligence and all these wonderful tools, right? And marrying that with us, right? We are not going anywhere, y'all. And a lot of people have said it, you still can't replace a teacher. And I totally believe that. And I buy into the phrase that AI is not going to replace a teacher, but a teacher using AI will replace a teacher not using AI. I 100% believe that. We've got to leverage that technology, but we need human intelligence. There's so many angles of this, and I'll address some of the really key ways at the end that I think you and your colleagues and friends around the country can use. But these two things have to have a really strong partnership. There's got to be a consistent handshake here and a holding of hands to blend these two worlds together moving forward. So just a couple minutes on some context. And this is a bit of a history lesson and also a bit of like where I've been in my journey in the last 10 years and what brought me to talking about not just alternative intelligence and AI and all these things, but just reimagining education and rethinking how we do things. So some of you may know who this guy is. Some of you may be saying it's a slightly older white male from the 1700s or 1800s. This could be anybody, right? This could be anybody in history. It happens to be Thomas Jefferson, one of the founders of our modern education system. If you've had a chance to go back into the history books and the shelves and dust off the cobwebs and read anything that he wrote from that time, it's really, really interesting. While obviously it's 200 and some, almost 300 years in the past, there were some things that they nailed. And this quote in particular, I think, is really indicative of where we are. We are still trying to educate the mass of the people, and it's more challenging than ever before, but no less important now than it was in 1776 or 1800 or 1900 or any of the years between then and now. We still want to create educational opportunities for everybody. It just looks different. It just looks very different. And one of the ways it started to look different from me as I started to, I'm not a history buff, but this journey of speaking and trying to change education has sort of made me appreciate history. And if you read anything about where early classrooms came from, they were modeled on the right after what you see on the left, which is the factory design, right? This is a factory from the Industrial Revolution, and the way we used to produce things was just line people up and pass things down the rows. It's where conveyor belts and assembly lines and all that first originated. To further date myself and make a 70s and 80s reference, any of us who grew up watching Little House on the Prairie, remember that one-room schoolhouse, right? Those small towns were often, the school was the church or the church was the school. It was all one building. So students sat in rows and pews. And if you think about it, a lot of schools haven't changed much. And yet our corporate, our work environment looks like this, right? This could be Microsoft or Google or Amazon or any of our more progressive companies that now have spaces that look like this, far more flexible than what we had before. And yet, how many of our classrooms still look just like this? And maybe this is a little bit outdated. Maybe our classrooms look a little more like this. Instead of a chalkboard, we have a smart board. Instead of individual desks, we have students in groups, yet they're all facing forward. They're all looking at one wall. They all have the same thing in front of them. We don't have a teacher in this image because I wanted to take it out and have you see kind of the room. But we haven't really evolved that much as a physical space, let alone what happens inside the classroom. And that's what we're going to get to the heart of here in just a minute, is really talking about what goes on in the heart of the classroom. And certainly there are exceptions, right? I do not want to paint the picture that every classroom in the country looks like this. I know there are some phenomenal ones, but there are far too many that are still stuck, as Holly Clark said in her talk yesterday, stuck in the 1980s, right? She talked about this generation of kindergartners retiring in the year 2085, which is so hard to think about. I hope I'm still here, maybe at 110 years old. But we're still teaching like it's 1985, 100 years apart in some respect. So we really need to kick that forward. And speaking of assembly line, I see this too often. This just kind of like bring 35 kids in a room, teach them all the same thing, and then spit them out in May or June, and they all magically have the same knowledge. Meanwhile, we take all the creativity and the fun out of learning. And I'll show you a graphic later of how I've kind of seen that progression evolve over time. And the last couple things I'll share are around some of the stats that I've looked at. And this will connect to, in particular, my journey as a parent, which I think is a real game changer for me. But this data is, I don't like using outdated data, but it's for a reason. So this is almost 10 years old now, from a Gallup poll from 2015. So pre-COVID, mind you, right? Far pre-pandemic, 5 years pre-pandemic, looking at the enrollment in teacher prep programs. So you already see from 2002 to 2016, the decline in interest in people coming into our profession. This is just California, mind you, right? And say what you will about my state, we have our share of issues, but we've usually supported education fairly well, and teachers have been excited to work and live here, and the salaries are better and things like that. But this data shows the opposite. Kind of a partner piece to that, a Gallup poll that was done, a survey you see there of almost 1 million students from end of 2015 into 2016. This data shows the percentage of students who agree with these statements. And what you're looking at here, you can see, you can read it for yourself, but blue is in the last 7 days, I've learned something. Green, I have fun at school. And red is I get to do my best every day at school. And just take the numbers away, look at the trend of the data from left to right. From, by the way, this goes back to 3rd grade, but I shortened it to 5th through 12th. From 5th grade on, what happens? And some of you are going like, yeah, I see that. Like, we suck the life out of them, right? It becomes so much more about tasks and homework and all that kind of thing. And students are just, they're over it. I've been waiting for the Gallup folks to unearth this poll, if you will, dig this poll back up and see what it looks like post-COVID, 4 or 5 years post-COVID, and see what that looks like. I would be fascinated to find what that data looks like. From that same study, this is a breakout of kind of a deeper look into student engagement. And what I want you to focus on is 10th, 11th, and 12th, that dark gray in the lower right-hand corner. This is the percentage of students that are actively disengaged at school. 1/3 of the students are saying, I'm not just tuned out, Mr. Bricker. I'm actively seeking other interests other than you. Not my class, of course, not your class, but everybody else's class, right? They're looking for distractions, looking for things to not learn, to not pay attention to what's going on because the classroom environment is not speaking to them. And again, that's 2015, 2016, y'all, 8 years ago, right? Imagine what that looks like even now in some of our classrooms. So it just got me to think about, what are the biggest challenges in our current system? What are we really faced with that we're trying to get through here? And now we get to the heart of this, of where we are and where we're going. So this is where I get to bring in my favorite little buddy. You saw him earlier, but this is our oldest son, Carter, who's now 9. And he was born in 2015. So you kind of see the timeline of how this all altered who I am, where I am, and the kind of educator I've become and want to be, and the kind of schools I want to create moving forward. So I have always said, I don't think you have to be a parent to be a good educator. But when you are a parent, you just see education in a completely different light. You see learning all day, every day, from the very first moment born. And you just have a different appreciation for what that learning process looks like. So I started, at the same time I'm looking at this data and looking in my classroom, seeing kids actively disengaged. And I try to make math fun and enjoyable, but I was watching kids kind of just zone out. Yet I'm watching Carter do this stuff and just experience life and enjoy every experience that he had. By the way, that picture on the left is not his first beer. It's a root beer. I just want to clarify that. Root beer is a big thing in our family. That was on a trip we were on, he and I, to San Francisco. But I was just enjoying his learning experience. I will say there have been a couple times where he wasn't so jazzed. When he found out he was going to be a big brother, we captured this photo and like tells every story of every older sibling finding out they're no longer an only child. I love that image. But most of the time we saw this. We saw just like love of learning and new experiences and splashing in the water and walking across the Golden Gate Bridge, something I had never done living 6 years in San Francisco. I never walked the Golden Gate Bridge, but he and I did it together on that same trip. And just really inspired me to want to create these experiences for our students in a world where this is what we see, right? They are looking at cell phones all the time. They're constantly, how many times do you see that lower left image around your school or around town, 5 students sitting together and they're not talking, they're all on their individual phones, maybe even texting each other, right? From that small group. That's ridiculous. We got to continue to communicate and work together. And social media, a whole nother challenge that we're facing, right? With people don't post pictures of where they are. It's 75,000 pictures of themselves, right? In different outfits and spots. And so just this shift of the world is really causing chaos for our schools and us trying to meet the students where they are. And circling back to the COVID impact again, that I know we're still feeling, the SEL challenges, the lack of communication, the fatigue, all these kinds of things that we're facing. It's more difficult than ever. It truly is more difficult than ever. And I apologize that I'm going so quickly again, but I will share these slides out with anybody who's interested later on. And the thing that really pushed me over the edge, that is going to push us through these last 15 minutes here, that I really hope will kind of transform your conversations and your work at schools, is at the end of the day, students are still measured by their GPA and standardized test scores. That's what colleges care about. Letters of rec, and there's other parts of the of the college application, but we're still moving students out of the K-12 experience with those numbers in mind. What's your SAT score? What's your class rank? And it's the focus is not on learning. And that I think really, really has to change. So if I look at what grading and assessment looks like, just tell me in the chat, or just think to yourself if I'm onto something here. This is kind of what it looks like, right? Early childhood, all about milestones. Can they walk? Can they talk? Can they sort? Can they stack blocks? All those kinds of things, right? And slowly, as you move through the K-12 experience, you move to a greater focus on points and assignments and task completion, right? Rather than learning on a continuum and milestones and standards and things like that. So I kind of put this to a graphic. And so you see kind of this move from milestones to test scores on the left, and exploration to regurgitation. And I'll just click these things. This is kind of what I see happen, is this downward slide, right? All resulting in engagement and interest and passion for learning just completely dissolving into nothing, right? Students are just they're so frustrated by all of this. And any of you who teach high school know the most popular question we get is this going to be on the test, or how can I earn extra credit, or how many points is this worth? That's their first question. Not how can I learn this better, or what can I do to better understand this topic, or how does this subject connect to that subject? We don't get those questions. We get questions about points, because 60% of the grading scale is failure to them, and they're terrified of it, right? Failure is not okay for these students in any way, shape, or form, and they learn very early on whether they're good or bad at something based on the grade they get, not their skill or their ability. So I'll put this quote up here and let you ponder it just for a second, and then we'll shift here in the last 10, 12 minutes to talking about what we can do. I'm just checking the comments too. I appreciate all the chatter there, and it sounds like you all are definitely experiencing some of the same things that I'm seeing at my school and the schools that I work with and speak to around the country. So this is what I hope we can get to. I really think we need to create schools that that value every part of the child. And it's not just about how many assignments did I turn in and did I check every box to get the 100 out of 100 points to move on to the next unit. We really need to create more curiosity and love for learning in these students so that they go into the world looking for more, right? Wanting to learn more about everything and everyone. I often think, like, what would the world be like if we were just more curious about each other instead of being all about ourselves and taking selfies? If we just took time, the 30 seconds it takes to take that selfie, to go meet a stranger and ask about themselves, ask about their experience, their what they've learned from the world and what they can offer me. I kind of wonder at times what that would look like in the world. So, okay, 10 minutes to go. Here's the point, right? Here's what we get to. I appreciate you kind of riding with me on providing some context of all this stuff. I think that's all valuable to figure out. Now, what do we do? Well, obviously AI is here, right? Here's 2 slides that I pulled, graphics I found on the internet. There are a million of them. This is not the first time AI has been introduced in the last couple of years, right? It's been coming for a long time. This was just a more violent arrival, if you will, with ChatGPT and now Copilot, etc. Ad nauseum, that list we have of tools. But it is here to stay. We can't ignore it. We can't push it away like we've done so many things in education, like books and the calculator and the internet and laptops. We try and block. We've got to figure out how to educate our students and our teachers and our parents. I'll talk about them in a minute, on what these tools are, what this technology is, and how it can benefit us. Here's something I found really interesting. I'll throw the link in the chat here. Let me pull it up. Oh, you don't want to see that on the stream, do you? So this is an article from Forbes magazine that talked about the top 10 most valuable skills. This was just published in February, and it's a really interesting read. And while I'm not suggesting that we teach, clinical healthcare at the 2nd grade level, I look at this list and I go, where are multiple choice tests? Where are, regurgitated homework assignments? Where all these things that we're still doing in education aren't nearly addressing the things that Forbes magazine is saying are the 10 most valuable skills that we should be teaching right now, right? And of course, we want to teach these things in context and at an age-appropriate level. But if we don't do it now, the gap that's going to form because of the rate at which AI is going to increase, we're just going to put this generation and future generations at a future deficit than we ever experienced from our education. And we still have all these skills that AI can't handle, right? Things like nonverbal communication and empathy and things of these nature that we have to inject into the curriculum and into the classroom. So I think the crux of this is, I'm just going to jump ahead a couple slides here, talk a lot about the 4 C's, but I want to get to some of the things that I think we can do to really change how assessment looks. So first things first, here's just a couple ways that I think we can leverage alternative technology. We've got to use it to create content. No more teachers pay teachers, please. We can't keep downloading worksheets and just regurgitating old assignments. We've got to redefine assessments and look at them in a different way. Encourage kids to use this in a safe environment so that they can be more productive, more efficient. And this list is just 6 among many, right? And you're going to see more things throughout this week at this event that are going to help you fill out that list even more. But one of the things I want to share with you, if you're not familiar, is the SAMR model. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. This is not a new thing by any means, but I just wanted to show you how easy it is to shift an assessment and an assignment to make it more of a redefinition than it is a substitution. So if you're not familiar, just to level set real quick, the SAMR model is just a way to measure the progression of an assessment or a project or something done in your company or in your classroom, right? Substitution, the very lowest level, entry level of redefinition or of change or of evolution. And then redefinition being that really high level, completely reimagining how things look. Let me walk you through one example, and then I'll show you some things I think that I hope you can put into your assessment toolkit to really change this conversation of assessment at your school. So substitution, student reads a story on a tablet rather than on paper. Pretty simple, right? We don't hand them a worksheet. We give them an iPad or a Windows device, and we ask them to read it. Level 1, very simple. We've all done that, right? Now we've got step 2, augmentation. We're gonna elevate this just a little bit. So not only are they going to read the story, but they're also going to take a quiz on some of the characters and events, and we're going to give them their score right away. 10 quick questions. Did you get what was happening in To Kill a Mockingbird? You got a 7 out of 10. Great. And we move on. Okay. Good feedback. Good feedback. Still better than just reading on paper, but we've still got more room to grow here in this continuum and meeting our students where they are. Now we get to the upper level, right? This is kind of like middle school into high school type thinking here. Modification. Now we're making some significant changes here. Not only are they reading a story, but now they're getting recorded digitally. The software is reading their face, recording what they say, and giving a report based on errors. You said this word incorrectly. You missed this word. Your speed was too fast in the middle part, and really giving students real-time feedback on their reading assignment. And then lastly, we look at the end of redefinition. Now you're talking about injecting AI into it, which is just one way you can redefine. You don't have to use AI as redefinition, but obviously I'm using it for this event. Now we're using AI to have students create a story at their level while also getting recorded and producing event. And by the way, when it's looking at their errors, it's then going to take those errors and use those errors, those incorrect spoken words in future assignments, right? It's going to collect that data on the student and help enhance their learning experience as they move forward. Now we're talking about something, right? Now I can have 35 readers at different levels in my classroom, all kind of moving along, and I get to sort of just like move around and help them as they go. That sounds like a classroom that is transformational. And by the way, if you're not familiar, this tool already exists. It's called Reading Coach and Reading Progress in the Microsoft environment, if you're familiar with that. Just one of the tools that can do things like this to really transform learning. So I encourage you in your own work to think about these things, and certainly encourage your colleagues as well to look at these things as well. So I want to skip, this is kind of the last slide. I want to make sure I get as close to 5 o'clock and try and get Amanda back on time here as she runs from session to session. These are just a few suggestions I have for you of ways that you can upgrade and update your assessment and data practices. I'll highlight just 2. The first one is portfolios. It's time consuming and arduous and crazy to collect work from an entire semester, but you learn more from looking at students on a continuum than just a series of individual assignments and points. I did this in my calculus class. I'm happy to tell you the story if you want to jump on a call and kind of walk you through that process a little bit more. But we need to look at students' progress and learning in a course on a continuum. And really, I'd love to see their whole K-8 or K-12 experience be a portfolio, right? Combined with the second thing I want to highlight, which is student data dashboards. Tongue twister there. We need to leverage the power of AI in generating data and pulling it together to evaluate how students are doing. Let me look at their reading scores combined with their family's history, combined with their attendance, combined with how many times they're in the nurses. Let me bring all this data together and have better informed decisions about how that student is doing in life, in and out of my classroom, than just, oh, Joey failed a quiz again. Maybe there's more to the story, right? Maybe there's more data and storytelling there we can find out about these students that alternative intelligence can kind of help us enhance. So I certainly encourage you to look at some of these things that shift the mindset and the approach away from what we've been doing in classrooms since all of us were in there as students, and now we're there as teachers kind of fighting these same battles. And just to burst your bubble right here at the end, these are some things I think we should get rid of. This is just a personal thing for me. We shouldn't be grading these things. And last but not least, I want to get rid of I already talked about the grading scale, and no more giving zeros. The zero doesn't tell us anything other than the student didn't turn it in. It doesn't tell us anything about their learning, and just in some respects creates an opportunity where students can't even do any sort of learning at all. So I hope that this kind of conversation will help you think and wonder a little bit more about how we can change assessment, how we can do this differently. And I hope you will follow along. I'll put my social media up in a minute. And I hope you'll kind of follow along in my journey as I build this idea of creating an awful learning environment where kids are just kind of in awe and wonder and curious about how we learn, and how we do school and how we kind of make this world an even better place. So thanks to the folks that were here live. Thanks to those that are watching the recording. And most importantly, Amanda, sincerely, thanks for the invite. Happy to do it. And here's to a great rest of the week and a great rest of the school year, y'all. Thanks so much.
Scott, your presentation was awful. Sorry, I had to.
I love that. It was very, very well played.
Yes.
Very well played. I appreciate you.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time. And also, don't forget our leadership panel is Thursday. Scott is going to join us again for that. And him and E-Twins are they've been behind the scenes working on some great panel questions. And there's going to be some robust discussions on Thursday. Jeff from Snorkel is in the chat. Please check out Snorkel. It is an amazing video AI feedback tool. And you can use it for reading fluency. We were just talking about that. And there's a Snorkel challenge. I'm going to go ahead and pop out of here so I can pop into Tony Vincent's presentation, which you should all follow me because Tony is fantastic. He brings all the puns and the dad jokes. And I'm popping popcorn for this one because I can't wait for the humor that's going to be involved with also his session. So thank you, Scott. And I will see you in the next session.